Welcome to episode 85 of the Breaking Balls podcast. A day late, and if you're Ryan Blaney, a lap short. We're recapping all the action as Austin Cindric somehow is your winner in St. Louis, Ad.
Yep, and Bob's got his glasses on to celebrate. Also, Christopher Bell came mighty close to winning this race. We'll break that down. SVG wins at Portland, and both Bob P's were at the track on NASCAR. Bob Pockris and Bob Perry.
It's me.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
Well, we've had a day to kind of go about thinking about what happened in this race. Austin Cindric is your winner. Welcome to the Breaking Balls podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam O'Shea. I'm here with my co-host Bob Perry, who was live at the track in East St. Louis. Bob, we're a day late, but we're not short on content.
And I made it back home, full gas and everything. That's the big story here. I did make it to lovely Madison, Illinois for the Enjoy Illinois 300. So apologies to our Breaking Balls fans. We are a day late. Listen, I was gassed last night, folks. Okay, I'm here for the content, but I can only do so much here. I left you high and dry. I'm sorry, but today we're going to give a little perspective on a really good race, something a little bit different as far as NASCAR with the varying strategies on a short track. But also, you watched it on TV and I got to see it in person, so I didn't have any commercials. It was kind of nice.
Yeah, I can only imagine you weren't as frustrated as the rest of us were that every, 7 to 8 laps we had the Fox experience. But nonetheless, I mean, I was just happy that you decided to get in the car and go. I mean, when you're that close to the race and tickets are as cheap as they were, I'm just happy you pulled the trigger, my friend. I would have moved the podcast back as much time as you needed. Anytime, we're at the end of the day, we're fans of this sport first. So anytime you get a chance to go to a race, you got to take it.
And I've been a motorsports fan for a long time. I've been growing up as a kid watching it. And I've always wondered, what it's like to be at a track, when Dale Jr. ran out of gas at the Coke 600, you see a last lap, big finish. And I finally got it there, Ad. I finally got that, oh my God, what did I just see moment. I had to text you immediately because we're a couple minutes in now, and we might as well say it. Austin Cindric was your winner at the NASCAR race in St. Louis here. Austin Cindric finally gets Penske into victory lane in 2024 in the unlikeliest of ways. Wasn't the best car, wasn't even the second best car today, but it's all about track position. Just in a war of attrition, Austin Cindric was your winner. But Ad, the feeling of the track when you see Ryan Blaney sputtering down the backstretch, you go, whoa, wait a minute. What just happened? He had the lead for the last 20 laps. It looked like he was going to cruise.
It was hysterical to me, Bob, because it was one of the rare occasions where you and Clint Bowyer had the same exact reaction to, oh my God, what is happening? And it was the same text I got from you, and hearing Clint read it off of my phone was one of the funnier things that could have happened to me this weekend. But, oh my goodness, this wasn't even, Austin Cindric wasn't on anyone's radar. I mean, don't get me wrong. He had a good day. I mean, especially by Austin Cindric standards, he had a very, very good day. But nobody thought it was good enough to get into victory lane. But lo and behold, Ryan Blaney just runs out of fuel. He had no idea, he said after the race, that he was that close on fuel. But nonetheless, I mean, it happened.
You have this race where it's a long strategy race, but the strategy was one thing. Fuel mileage was never a factor. You never heard anybody say, oh, Ryan Blaney needs to save. You never heard anybody say he needs to watch it. We're coming up on the window here. You heard Larry Mack after the race say, okay, well, Austin Cindric put in 2 cans of fuel. The 12 team never put that second can in, and I guess that was the difference there. They thought they were good, and ultimately they weren't. But it's just, I guess it's very rare in today's age in NASCAR with all the technology and everything at the team's fingertips to have a moment like this where they say, we just got it wrong completely here. And in a shocking turn of events, it was Ryan Blaney that once again is just the guy that always seems to get kicked down at Penske when there's an opportunity there. He's the one that gets screwed. Because this is a track where Penske has just historically been dominant at. You said Austin Cindric wasn't on anybody's radar. It's very fair. You go back and watch the last few races at Gateway, Worldwide Technology, whatever you want to call it. Penske has had speed there every year. So it's not shocking to see Penske in the victory lane, but it's how we got there. Like I told you earlier, if you would have told me 10 laps to go in the race, Austin Cindric's going to win this race. Wouldn't have believed you, but here we are. Once again, that man with the glasses is somehow still celebrating tonight.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where I think as far as the big picture goes, nobody saw Austin Cindric getting a win. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think if anybody, if it wasn't Ryan Blaney, it was Christopher Bell. I mean, Christopher Bell was
Oh, yeah.
consistently driving through the field. Looked like a hot knife through butter for most of the day, to be honest with you. I mean, it just seemed like he could put the car wherever he wanted it, and then all of a sudden, that was the first domino that fell, was his engine going a cylinder down and really lacking power. And yeah, it's just one of those things where, Austin Cindric was so far off of my radar considering all of the good cars that were on the track. But ultimately, like I keep saying, it happened, Bob. Austin Cindric won.
Well, you have Christopher Bell, who's got 20 lap fresher tires, and he had about 8-second gap to run down Cindric and Blaney, and does it within about 15 laps. You got a span there with about 25-20 to go. And it was some of the best racing for the lead we've had all year, where you have Christopher Bell on the inside of Ryan Blaney, just trying to somehow get clear of him on exit of turn 1 or turn 4, and just could never do it. But it was a masterclass in Ryan Blaney with the defensive driving. And then you finally got Christopher Bell clear for just a second there, coming out of turn 4 on the front stretch with, I think it was 18 laps, it was something like that. But anyway, Bell clears Blaney, and Blaney immediately sends it and does the crossover move on the front stretch and gets him back in turn 1 and turn 2. And that was ultimately the race, because I think the next lap you saw Bell's engine basically blow up, and Ryan Blaney was basically free on from there out. For Christopher Bell to have all that speed all day at it, it was great racing, but just, I felt like I was robbed of a great finish there. And then I did.
No, I agree with you 100%. It just felt like we were heading for a very, very good finish, and we ended up getting one just for a completely different reason. I guess my question to you, Bob, is because obviously with you being at the race, was it apparent when Christopher Bell's engine blew up? Because obviously the broadcast, we knew about it pretty much instantly, but from someone who was in the stands, what was that experience like?
So my original thought was that Bell was sending it on the bottom for all those laps. I thought he cooked his tires originally when he had that fall off for about a lap or two. And then as it was notable that, that pace was gone and he slowly got swallowed up by the rest of the field, and then you had ultimately Martin Truex Jr. pushing him to top 10 there. But no, it wasn't really obvious for the first lap or two. I thought his tires were gone, but then it started to make more sense that, as Cindric got by him and Hamlin and the rest of the field did, that obviously Bell was just limping home and getting as much as he can. But, like I said, Truex pushed him there to a top 10. Bell does get a stage 1 and 2 win there. So it wasn't like it was a full wash day. But he had the interview at the end of the race with Jamie Little where he said, you don't get a race car like that many times. So to not come away with a win, it is disappointing. It does feel frustrating. And I can sympathize with him there.
Oh, 100%. I mean, big shout out to, if your teammates don't have you, who does? Shout out to Martin Truex McQueen for pushing Christopher Bell to a decent finish. He deserved it. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, the car was so good all day, and it was good to see him at least limp home and get somewhat of a finish, like you said, with the 2 stage wins. But yeah, man. And then obviously, I think the next big thing was Blaney's problems seemed to be more apparent to me. Obviously, the broadcast, they did a great job again, almost instantly reacting. Clint Bowyer went into full panic mode. Was that one very apparent to you, or was that another one where it took a second to kind of realize what was going on?
Oh, no. So I didn't even notice until I watched the highlights that Blaney actually went and sputtered on, at first coming out of the backstretch, but then ultimately he died on right at the start finish line. That's where Cindric passed him. I didn't even notice it till Blaney had come into view on the back stretch there. We had just kind of assumed, okay, it's wrapped up here. We're just kind of checking the rest of the field there to see where this finishing order is. And then you see this neon 12 slowly crawl through the backstretch, and you just start seeing everyone point going, that's Blaney. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And then all of a sudden you see Cindric all of a sudden zoom by on the front stretch, and the race is over. As quickly as Cindric is doing these burnouts and you're walking down the aisle to leave this race, you're just trying to come up with the fact that Penske won this race, but it wasn't the guy you thought. Ryan Blaney is still sputtering around the track as we're leaving and getting a standing ovation from the crowd. It was like I said, Ad, to see all these moments on TV and actually get it in person, you get to finally experience that. Oh my God, I'm trying to process this as I'm walking out, and I still fully can't. And even 24 hours later, I still can't.
I can only imagine. I mean, it was one thing, like you said, when you're at home, you're kind of at the mercy of wherever the guy in the truck puts the camera on. So I can only imagine, especially, as you're sitting in the stands, there's so much going on at these races, so much to look at, to hear, to smell. Your senses are on sensory overload the entire time. And when you've kind of resigned to the fact that Ryan Blaney was going to win this race, I can only imagine the pure shock almost when you saw that, like you said, that neon 12 car just come sputtering to a little bit of a stop. I mean, it was crazy for me at home. So I've been, I've had so many questions on the tip of my tongue, just kind of waiting to ask you, waiting to talk through this with you. So interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was just you see Ryan Blaney sputtering across the finish line, and it's just kind of resonating to you. Okay, he really didn't win this race; it was gas, and you have Cindric doing the burnout there. But one of the things that I noticed, because I did go back and watch the broadcast today, was that one of the really only notable things, because this was a long green flag stretch run, which coming into this weekend, we had never had green flag pit cycles at Gateway, which kind of blows my mind after seeing how it unfolded today. But anyway, you had the Christopher Bell engine that we had, but late in stage 2, right before Bell wrapped up and got the stage win there, on the last lap, going into turn 1, Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch, the battle of the Kyles there, they get into it, and Fox, of course, has the tightest shot on it they could possibly. It was actually side by side originally, and then the replay was so tight, but I thought that was a moment that the broadcast didn't really capture great, because in the moment at the track, you saw that and you go, oh man, those are two really notable drivers, and Kyle Busch had a great car today, led laps, is out. He's a guy that needs playoff points. He needs, not only that, he needs results. This is his first DNF, and he even said it at a horrible time. They can't have this ad. I just thought that was a really big moment in this race, and potentially even the season for Kyle Busch.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it was one of those things, hearing the comments after the race from Kyle Busch basically saying, oh, I don't know why Kyle Larson's racing me like that. That he's trying to get me for one spot, and those points mean way more to me than it does to him. And I get that, but honestly, I mean, from my perspective, which, mind you, like you said, wasn't a very good one given the camera angles that Fox gave us, it seemed a lot like Kyle Busch was the one forcing the issue and kind of forcing that contact into Kyle Larson. I mean, I understand maybe the argument that, Kyle Larson's on some older tires. Maybe he's trying to make the low line work. But ultimately, this feels like it was pretty indicative of Kyle Busch's season as a whole. I mean, he just keeps trying to force things that aren't quite there. And he's getting incredibly frustrated when these things don't work. Almost instantaneously. It's almost like you're watching a driver regress, but he's almost frustrated that he's regressing as opposed to maybe adapting how he's driving, adapting the things that he's doing in the car to really get himself some decent finishes, which he desperately needs right now.
Well, I think the biggest key word that you just said there is frustrated. And you look at the incident here with Kyle Larson, and yeah, Larson gets loose at the bottom and takes him out, but you have them battling down the front stretch, and they rub a couple of times, and Kyle Busch is pinning him down in the corner. That's the risk you take there. And for Kyle Busch, you have to think, is the juice worth the squeeze here? He even came out and said, we're racing for stage points there. Yeah, you are. But that's, I think, 6th and 7th or 5th and 6th at that point in stage 2. Is it worth throwing your whole day away for one spot in stage points there? I mean, ultimately, yeah, you can look back and say 2 points here may cost you, but instead, you threw out your whole day for that moment, and you didn't get stage points or finishing results for a day where you had Austin Dillon finish in the top 10, and you led laps at a race where you won last year. This is the last time you won. It's been a calendar year since you've won it for Kyle Busch. You have to have the awareness that, and look, I know it's rich saying for me to tell Kyle Busch to have awareness, but he's frustrated in that moment. He needs results. He has to finish races. Not going to do it wrecking a race car, racing for 7th in stage 2.
And the funniest thing about this is it's very rare where we have an on-track incident and both drivers can make the same argument of, what are you doing racing like that? It's only one stage point. I think both guys can honestly look at each other and say that, given, what happened, like you said, with Kyle Larson getting loose and then the kind of the beating and banging down the straightaway that, that really put Kyle Larson down in that line. It's just one of those instances to where it's kind of like, if you're Kyle Busch, you've got to know that you need this day. You need this day to go well. It's very rare that, like you said, it's been very rare this season, or very few and far between, that you've got a car that can really finish and run up towards the front. You've got to take advantage of days like this. And ultimately, if Kyle Busch doesn't make it into the playoffs, this is going to be one that we look back on and circle and say, yeah, that's part of it for sure.
100%. This was a weekend where, Yeah, maybe they don't win this race, but they have to at least put themselves in a position like Austin Cindric to be there at the end of the race to win. And that's the thing, man. Kyle Busch said, I'm racing for stage points. Everything matters. But like I said earlier, you didn't get the stage points and you didn't even get a result. This is his first DNF this year, which is kind of weird to think about because of how much they've struggled. But if they haven't gotten a DNF yet, let's say they add 1 or 2 more DNFs just to kind of keep that law of averages through the year. I mean, he's going to be in a huge hole for these playoffs if he's not careful. And if we have more surprise winners like Austin Cindric here, I mean, let's face it, Cindric winning on Sunday really throws a wrench in the whole playoff grid, especially depending on what we do with Kyle Larson's waiver or not. I don't even have the energy to start with that right now. Please don't, okay? Don't even start with this waiver. If I hear the word waiver one more freaking time, oh my God, just clear it. Let's move on. But anyway, Austin Cindric's win ad really does throw a wrench in everything because depending on what you're looking at here, Chris Buescher could be out, Logano could be out, Briscoe. There's a lot of quality drivers, and that's still with 11 more races to go this year.
There's a lot more questions than answers, and I think, obviously, you hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, Austin Cindric put himself in a position to win this race by just surviving. And, the car was good enough all day. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the show. And ultimately, I still can't get over the fact that Austin Cindric won, but even more for the overall playoff picture is now we're sitting with the drivers who are 18th and 19th in points, but with Austin Cindric and Daniel Suarez both have wins, so they're both locked in. And some of the guys on the bubble, the Josh Berry, the Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Chase Briscoe, guys like that, Chris Buescher, Bubba Wallace. It just is. It's so interesting because of how NASCAR, with the win and you're in with the playoffs, it just throws such a wrench in because if any of these guys who don't have a win yet get one, we're headed for some calamity at this point.
And let's say, for hypothetical sake, Kyle Larson does get his waiver, and he is now in the playoffs. You have, I think, 8 drivers with wins this year, maybe 9 if I've counted right here. My math's not great. Let's say he's in. Ryan Blaney's even 34 spots on the cutoff line right now. And again, with 11 races left, and you've got Watkins Glen, you've got Sonoma next week, Atlanta's still coming up, Daytona is in the distance still. I mean, there's a lot of different what-if races coming up where a guy like Michael McDowell or somebody, a Todd Gilliland can come into a plate race and win one of these. A Chase Briscoe, a Josh Berry. There's so many variables here that if you're someone like a Joe Logano, a Kyle Busch, even a Bubba Wallace, this Austin Cindric win today or on Sunday was just the worst possible thing as far as the playoff cut line.
I mean, I think of a guy like Ross Chastain who, has calmed down as of late for sure, but has a way to not finish races from time to time. It was really boom or bust last year. And obviously he's sitting pretty comfortably in a spot right now, but who knows, with the rest of this year, with guys getting more and more desperate, the racing getting tighter and tighter, it's just going to be so interesting to see how this whole thing shakes out. I mean, that's just kind of one of the names where you look a little bit further up the standings, maybe someone who could fall a little bit. But yeah, man, you mentioned his name, so I'm going to talk about him because I do it every time I can. Michael McDowell was on the poll today, just in case you guys were wondering. I believe in Michael McDowell's supremacy. It does make you, does beg the question after all these polls this year, why would you leave Front Row Motorsports? It seems like you've got a good thing going on, but ultimately money talks, and here we are. But yeah, I if you would have told me a Ford was going to win this race, Austin Cindric simply was not on my bingo card for who was going to do it.
No, and I mentioned how Sonoma's next week. Michael McDowell, who looked really good to start this race, like you said, on pole, led the first 40 laps, and then Bell passed him right before the stage break. Michael McDowell is a guy that points at Sonoma next week and says, we've got a shot. You even heard them at the beginning of the race, that pre-race pit huddle, and they said, hey, imagine next week if we've already won. So they've got their eyes circled to a race like Sonoma, and that's just one guy. There's multiple guys in the field that are going to be looking. Even someone like Ty Gibbs, who's a pretty good on road course, he's in a good spot in the playoff bubble, but to get that win and lock himself in, it's just going to keep pushing that room for error and that margin in the gap shorter and shorter as each person wins and that playoff spot gets filled. I'm very interested to see what it looks like, because you've got guys that are potentially looking really good each week, but they can't get results, like you said. And Kyle Busch, obviously, at 35th, Martin Truex with 34th, but Josh Berry, again, he had the tire cut down 36th. That you can't have DNFs when the margin is so thin right now.
100%, especially, 11 races to go. If there wasn't a sense of urgency, there has to be one now, especially if you're even anywhere near the bubble, because, that's the beauty of this sport is that when when you unload every week, no matter where the track is, you have an idea of who's going to be a contender, but you never exactly know who the winner is going to be. I'm just going to say it before I forget it. Next week, you got to kind of look at Martin Truex Jr. too. I mean, Toyotas have had some success at Sonoma, so it should be an interesting, just one of those another guys to keep an eye on to see if he can get his win. But yeah, man, we're just headed for, like I keep saying, it's going to be a little bit of calamity towards the end here. Obviously, it always finds a way. The law of averages seems to find its way in and shake, kind of have this shake out the way it's quote unquote supposed to. But it certainly does feel like we could be headed for something crazy here.
Even someone like Bubba Wallace, who, like I said, was just inside the cut line right now, he was running top 10, top 15 most of the day. But you look at where he finished was 21st, and the rest of his Toyota teammates are consistently in the top 10. You've got to get those results right now. And, someone like Todd Gilliland's a great example. He's 16th. Was he the fastest car all day? No, but strategy had him cycle out, and ultimately, track position was the biggest key today. And you look at someone like Carson Hocevar, Justin Haley, another top 10 today, and 9th, Hocevar in 8th. Those are guys that aren't in great equipment, but they're getting great wheelman results, but also they're just maximizing their track position and not making mistakes. And that is half the battle right now in this next gen car.
And I'll say this, Justin Haley feels like a kind of like a snowball going downhill at the moment, where he just keeps gaining momentum. The finishes keep getting better and better. Who's to say he doesn't back his way into a win towards the end of the season, especially at one of these super speedways? I mean, it's not out of the picture, and that's the beauty of this whole, of the playoff picture and everything. But it's crazy. This is just crazy to me, Bob. It's one of these things where the more you think about it, the further down the rabbit hole you go, the more options there are. And I mean, it's crazy to me that, we've talked it this long, and it's not very often we go this long in the podcast without mentioning it, but Denny Hamlin finished second today, and it's basically a non-story.
Yeah, that is a guy who every week is running in the top 5, top 10. Obviously, he's the point standing leader right now. I think it's 4 straight top 5 finishes for him. I know Keselowski is 3 straight top 3, but Hamlin is running just as consistent right now. Obviously, the wins maybe aren't as brash and as crazy as and dominant as you think. You think back to Richmond, where he kind of stole it from Martin Truex Jr., races like that. But I mean, ultimately, Denny Hamlin is running very consistent and you've got to be happy with how that's going. We're in a week where you're not even a factor per se. To finish second, that's a good feeling there. But I will say this: it seems like on the other side of the manufacturer battle, it's Chevy and Toyota. Really, Ford looked really good today, but on the Chevy side, really quick, RCR looks like they nail the setup when they come to St. Louis every time. Whether it's Kyle Busch, you had Austin Dillon run the top 10. What have we not said already in this podcast? Hendrick Motorsports. And I think back to last year with Corey LaJoie, how he filled in for Chase Elliott in that 9 car. Had that big moment where he's finally good equipment and didn't run well. But people chalked it up to, well, Hendrick's not good at St. Louis. And another year, Ad, where that is the case. I mean, you look at the results here. You had Kyle Larson get that issue. He finished 10th. But otherwise, Chase Elliott 13th, Byron 15th. Bowman was slow today in 28th. This track, for whatever reason, just does not go well with Hendrick. And that is something you never say.
No, it's very rare that Hendrick Motorsports has this significant of trouble at a racetrack. I mean, obviously, I think, we've talked about what each manufacturer has as far as like a specialty, but I mean, it feels like no matter where they unload, Hendrick always has a chance between one of the 4 drivers. But yeah, you're 100% right. It seems like for the past few years, at least, they've kind of just been a no-show at this track. And why that is, I don't know. I think, no, I don't think anybody really does. I think it's got to be something to do with the setup. But ultimately, I mean, if you asked them, I don't think that you would see them or say they're doing anything different, or, they're, not allocating the resources or anything like that. But at this point, it is starting to become very noticeable that for whatever reason, when NASCAR goes to St. Louis, you kind of have to not even factor the Hendrick cars in, which is crazy to say.
No, but it's very true where it almost looks like Penske and Hendrick switched their titles as the top dog in the garage in this track. You had the Penske guys were obviously Cindric and Blaney we've talked about, but Logano was quietly in the top 10 most of the day there. It was at one point it was 1, 2, 3 in stage 3 for Penske there, and you thought, okay, this is really their track. But yeah, that's something to watch moving forward. I know the Penske group would definitely wish that we would have 2 races in St. Louis, if not more. But
yeah, I mean, when you literally own the place, I mean, it's one of those things where you would hope to be successful at the place that you own. So there is no more home cooking than that track for Penske in a weird way. But yeah, there is probably no team in NASCAR happier to see.
For our lovely folks that are 20 something minutes in, Adam is thinking of Indianapolis. Penske does not own St. Louis. There is no home cooking, folks. There is no home cooking. There is no. Trust me, Roger Penske does not own any land in East St. Louis. Are you kidding me? There is not a chance that man is investing in that area. Are you kidding me? That man wears sweaters in the middle of the summer. He is not investing any land in East St. Louis, Illinois. No chance.
My goodness, I am thinking about Indy. I am brain dead. Who would have thought you would have been the one to drive 4 hours to the track, 4 hours back from the track, and I would be the one that's brain dead during the podcast?
Turns out racing autism is very good when you have a racing podcast, my friend. It works out every now and then, let me tell you. No, Ad, we've talked about some of the results here from St. Louis. We've kind of wrapped that up, but we did have a doubleheader on Saturday. The trucks were in St. Louis. That was all fine and dandy. Corey Heim was your winner there. But then you had the doubleheader after St. Louis got pushed back, and they were interfering with Portland's Xfinity race because we sent our Xfinity crews all the way to the West Coast, no live pit stops. But don't you worry, we still got highlights from it because our beautiful New Zealander, Shane Van Gisbergen, finally does it. 13 races into his NASCAR Xfinity career, finally breaks that ceiling and gets the win in victory lane. And Ad, let me tell you, does a burnout the entire lap around Portland International Raceway. What a hell of a way to do it.
Yeah, the burnout was one thing. The punt with the Aussie football afterwards was probably one of the coolest things I've seen as far as a celebration in a long time. But, if you're surprised that he got his first win on a road course, you simply shouldn't be. I mean, the talent is just there. As soon as he kind of gets more and more comfortable on these ovals as he has been, it just seems like he's been getting better and better, more and more used to it week after week. And, there's always this thing where he's going to show up to road courses and probably perform. Almost makes you wish he was running at Sonoma, but what are you going to do, Bob?
We have 2 supercars drivers running in the Sonoma race next week with Will Brown and Cam Waters. And Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be spotting for one of them instead of driving. It is simply a fallacy. He'll be running in the Xfinity race, so there's not even the excuse of logistics. He will be on track for the weekend. It's a shame to not have him in there when they should be getting him as much Cup experience as possible. I know he's already got the full schedule right now, but what's the point if you're not going to run him in a Cup Series road course race when you've got him in a developmental deal?
Well, even just from, even if not for the experience, for the marketing of the fandom, you could have 3 Aussie supercar drivers in this race, which is a huge opportunity to get into that international market, which NASCAR seems to really want to do. So why not put them on the track together? It just seems like a missed opportunity, especially, you've been so adamant about getting him as much seat time as possible. Why not find him a seat for this race? It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. It's really bumming me out, to be dead honest with you, but ultimately that's the decision they're going with.
And here's the other caveat is you have this report come out today with Bob Pockrass and Fox Sports kind of updating the silly season rumor mill. And he's talking about how if NASCAR does adapt this 3-car charter where teams can only have 3 cars, well, Trackhouse has already have the logjam of drivers we've been very notable about on this channel. It sounds like Zane Smith could potentially be the odd man out because he's, I think, 34th in the point standings right now. Obviously, he's been loaned out to Spire. Whether that's a research and development car, what's the issue with that 71 car? I'm not totally sure, but what it is what it is. He's not ran well. And for someone like Shane Van Gisbergen, who I believe coming into this weekend after Portland in the Xfinity race, that's 13 races of sample size, 3 top 10s, 2 top 5s, a couple of top 15s as well. And here's the other thing to keep in mind, Ad. He's learning all these tracks, and there is very little to no practice time in the Xfinity series right now. So he's getting first look at these tracks. Stage 1 and stage 2 at tracks like Darlington and Dover are his practice laps. And so if you're thinking, okay, we want him to have seat time, why are we not giving him Cup Series time at Sonoma when the next gen car is so much different than the Xfinity car? I just don't understand that, especially when you've got Zane Smith running out there for Trackhouse Fire. And if he's your odd man out, let's go ahead and make some moves here. Let's get SVG a spot in the Cup Series in Sonoma. People, make it happen.
And this feels like one of those areas where it's like, if you want to see how far guys come, you may as well give him this chance. Because the first time he got in the next gen car on a road course, it was, brand new track. Nobody had seen it before, and he ends up winning the thing. Now he's had a little bit of run in Xfinity, like you said. Not very difficult for him to get used to all these tracks with the little practice at Xfinity. But I just think before you make this Zane Smith decision, it would have been good to see maybe a touch of a sample size, of just what does this look like with him in Cup on a road course? Was it a one-off in Chicago, or is this something that he is going to consistently do every time you go to a road course? I don't know. It just seems like you said, with the log jam that's going to happen if this 3 charter thing, ends up going through and is a part of the deal, I would have liked to have done a little bit more due diligence with SVG to make sure that that's your guy, because say what you will about Zane Smith and his performance this year, he's still a heck of a talent.
100%. I think that's the other thing lost on all these people is that coming into the season, he was a super hot prospect and was desired by almost everyone. They almost pushed Todd Gilliland out last year at front row for him because they wanted to get him some seat time in that thing. So I totally understand that. It doesn't even have to be an or situation. It could be an and situation where they both are getting seat time and see who's got the better, drive time right now. Because at the end of the day, Ed, the only way to get better is live reps. You see that with Kyle Larson at the Indy 500. What screwed him? It wasn't anything with the speed or the race pace. It was the green flag pit stops. For SVG, as many reps as you can get with live track time in the Cup Series, especially with pit stops and all of these different factors, it's invaluable. And like I said, it doesn't have to be an and or. It could be both of them in the car. You could throw another car out there. Project 91 could be out there. You could find sponsorship. I'm not running a NASCAR team. I don't know the logistics behind it, but I'm just, as a fan, disappointed that we're not getting the full experience, because we could have 3 supercars champs, or supercars drivers, like you said, Ad. That's going to be huge viewership.
Yeah, it just feels like a missed opportunity for sure, but ultimately we're going to have to live with it. Bob, looking back on the weekend, I'll say this. When you told me that you were going to go to the race, I said to myself, you know what? Good for Bob. He gets to experience a NASCAR race without having to listen to Kevin Harvick and Clint Bowyer just kind of talk over each other and ramble in his ear. But ultimately, the broadcast was pretty solid this week. I mean, I don't know if it's because you weren't watching or what it was, but I noticed a pretty vast improvement in what was going on in the booth this week.
From the replay I watched today, Ad, I gotta give the props to Clint Bowyer. He was pretty darn good in this race, and I think Kevin Harvick brings the best out of him. Kind of that stern dad that, hey, you can be yourself, but be professional here. You're still doing a job for fans. And the Bowyer Harvick dynamic in a race today, where you were learning with the broadcast what the strategy and how this race was unfolding. You got to learn with Harvick and Bowyer, and I thought that dynamic was really good, Ad. For as much slander as we give Fox, and obviously the broadcast production quality itself is a whole different topic, that is just lost. The fact they had SVG in the final standings for a race he didn't run was just wild. But no, the commentary itself, Mike Joy is what he is. Fantastic, a legend. You'll have some slip-ups here and then with his age, but a legend in the sport. Harvick has just been a breath of fresh air into this commentary booth and is getting the best out of Clint Bowyer weekly. And for as much slander as we give Fox, listen, very, very good week, Ad. I will say, obviously was walking down by the track before the race, did run into Mr. Bowyer and Mr. Harvick. I did try and get the scoop on what the secret password or the secret word was going to be on the broadcast this week. Kevin laughed at me and said, I can't tell you, kind of shut me down. Fugazi, though. Fugazi was the word, huh? Really?
I'll say this much. Not only did he say Fugazi, he completely just threw it at it. Like, he fumbled it. He fumbled the bag. It's one of those things. Fugazi does not mean what he said it did. The best part is nobody in the booth had the audacity to even call him on it,
That car's Fugazi.
Yeah, that car's Fugazi. It's not real? Anyway, but it was one of those
Hold on. Add. For our lovely listeners, go ahead. As an Italian American, go ahead. Let us know what Fugazi is. What's the Adam O'Shea definition?
Fugazi, who gives a fuck? It's not real. It literally is not real. It means it's not there. No, that's all it means. It just means it's not there. So when he started saying that, I was like, no. I was like, the car is definitely still there. I can see it with my own two eyes. But yeah, it was a whole. I think it's just so fun that even Kevin Harvick, like you said, who is the very serious dad of the booth. I think that's a really good description of what's going on there. You're 100% right. He just kind of keeps on checking Clint Bowyer, but even for him to just be having a little bit of fun, it just brings a little element to this broadcast that I think it really needed. And, ultimately it takes a little bit of time to form that chemistry in the booth, but all power to them. They're making it happen. And I'm starting to really enjoy it.
And I do believe they're having fun with each other. I do think that, for as much shenanigans and, frustration as you can have with Fox, and you can even tell with the commentary sometimes that they're frustrated with the broadcast. You had that battle with Bell and Blaney, and they cut to the kids, the split screen with the kids for a half second, and then you miss the whole front stretch. Kevin Harvick is just seething at that. But I like to think deep down when he's walking up to the booth at the race Sunday, and I asked him about the secret word. He's walking up going, people really are wondering what the secret word is every week. Is this really what America has turned to? And yes, Kevin, this is how easily entertained we are. This is literally, the bar is this low. So congratulations. You have us all captured every week, wanting to know who's going to fumble the bag or just yeeted across pit road. It's just wild to see what Uncle Kevin's going to say every week.
No, you're right. It's just fun. And I think at the end of the day, people watch these races to have fun, to relax, to enjoy themselves a little bit. And just to have this booth doing such a good job of facilitating that, regardless of what you think on the production side of it, like you said, I think the frustration is evident, even with the announcers. But, at least we've got old Uncle Kevin and young Clint Bowyer there to keep things fresh for us.
Oh, man. It was weird, though, not having the commercials and the commentary this week. On a strategy race like this, you kind of feel like you're on an island at the track where you kind of are piecing it together. But, I mean, you're out there just kind of treading water and hoping you can figure it out there. That being said, was a great experience. If you were in the area and ever want to go to a NASCAR race at Worldwide Technology, I still call it Gateway. It's still Gateway to me, damn it. But will recommend it 10 out of 10. Obviously, the venue itself, for it being built for just IndyCar, Xfinity Truck Series, pretty darn good facilities from what I've noticed. Fairly easy in and out right off the highway, 45 minutes. Concessions were awful. They were running out of everything. Missed about 75 laps of stage 2, so that wasn't great. Waiting for a burger, but ultimately, outside of that, I will say, just for the experience-wise, fan attendance was packed. Juiced crowd. You could just feel the energy around. Would definitely recommend, if you're on the fence about going, if you're near St. Louis, or that definitely would make the trip out, because it's worth it. Like you said, it's stimulation overload.
It's one of those things. I'm listening to you talk, and I'm so happy that you got to go to the race. But ultimately, Bob, I had one thing that you didn't throughout this entire race. Well, actually, two things. One, air conditioning, and two, Larry Mack, baby. Because, and especially in a strategy race like this one, there was nothing better than having Larry Mack come in and give his 2 cents. What a gem that gentleman is for the sport, and he just does so much to help understand the race. If there was ever a day to miss him, Bob, this was certainly it.
I was definitely, as I was leaving, I was thinking to myself, I wonder what Larry Mack thinks about this fuel situation with Ryan Blaney. I wonder what the trends were for this one. Yeah, listen, for as much as we talk about Fox's broadcast, and even we've talked about Bowyer getting booted from Larry, Larry just brings so much wisdom, and for as much over-the-top knowledge as he has about, the fuel mileage and all this aerodynamic stuff, he makes it presentable and breaks it down easily for us simpletons, I call us. And I am one of those simpletons. How you doing? But again, Larry Mack's a treasure. That was the one big minus, was not having him around in my ear on Sunday. But other than that, I'd definitely 10 out of 10 experience, and we'll definitely be going back.
Dude, I could not be more jealous that you got to watch live NASCAR. And like you said, to have that stimulation overload, haven't had it since we went to the Clash a few years ago, and I'm kind of itching to get it again. I really need to figure out, just circle something on the schedule, throw a dart at the dartboard, and see where it lands, and just show up to a race. I mean, I need to get back to the track.
NASCAR, come back to California, and we don't count Sonoma. Those people out in Southern California don't count Sonoma as California. I'm slowly learning California culture through Adam, and that is something I've learned. Is NorCal and SoCal, very different entities, but one day you'll be back in NASCAR territory, I promise.
Yeah, instead I just get to look at the aerial shots of Fontana and cry. So that is what it is.
Hey, they say they're gonna rebuild it. They say the stands are still there. It's not coming back. It's dead.
It's not.
It's dead, folks. It's not coming back. Accept its fate.
It's not.
That's gonna be an Amazon plant one day. And you know what? For that, we bid farewell on that day in Fontana. Again, at episode 85 of the Breaking Balls podcast. First, hand to God, I apologize for being a day late on this one. This was not an Adam. This was a Bob episode delay. But hopefully you can forgive me. We needed boots on the ground on this one.
And not only that, I think you can all forgive us because a solo Bob episode, the Bobcast, is one thing. A solo Adam episode is something that we simply as a podcast cannot afford. For all we know, Rick Hendrick would own Talladega at the end of the podcast. So God knows what I would say out loud in English.
Listen, we have lawyers to double check Adam. That's the good thing. But yes, we have to be careful about how we use him, because otherwise he could get us in big trouble. He is like the big trump card. He can win you the match with one knockout, but you gotta be careful with it. You can't use it too powerful. It's like a big twister.
100%. I am the sledgehammer that is often looks like the federal government. I come down with a lot of strength, but if I miss, boy, oh boy, am I going to fuck something up.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've made it this far somehow, go ahead and like and subscribe. We cover NASCAR on a weekly basis here at Breaking Balls. Somehow Austin Cindric was your winner at St. Louis. Ryan Blaney is still searching for fuel out in Madison, Illinois. And Christopher Bell's Toyota engine blew up a week after Honda had a debacle at Indianapolis. Did I miss anything, Ad?
No, but Bob, thank you for putting on the glasses to remind us that Austin Cindric won it. It felt like you got into character, and that's what we needed for this show.
Yes. Of course. Well, once again, episode 85 of the Breaking Balls podcast. Go ahead and make sure you follow along for more content. Sonoma this week. We will be back for all the content in California. Ad close to your neck of the woods, just a state north in NorCal. But for Breaking Balls, Adam and Bob, we'll see you next week.
See you.